It's Tuesday, November 4th, 2025, Election Day. What are the betting markets saying? Nuking the filibuster, apparently back on the menu, and a portrait of persecution in Nigeria. Next on the AM Update. It is Election Day in a few key races around the country, notably out east in New Jersey. Here are what the betting markets like Polymarket have to say about what they think the winner of these races will be. New Jersey gubernatorial election, Mikey Sherrill, the Democrat, with an 86% chance of beating Republican Jack Ciattarelli. 86% to Ciattarelli's 14%. I think of any of the races, the key races that are being tracked today, I think this is probably actually the best opportunity for a Republican to pull an upset. In Virginia, that gubernatorial race is basically over, if the betting markets have to say anything about it. Abigail Spanberger, the just rabid leftist Democrat, 98% chance of winning to 2% for Winsome Earl Sears in the Virginia Attorney General election race. Republican Jason Miyares, according to Polymarket, has a 57% chance of beating Jay Jones. That would be the Democrat murder fantasist, which is a word I think that I made up. 57% odds for that Republican to beat Jay Jones. Again, that is the key race for me. If Republicans can't beat somebody who is on the record in text messages fantasizing about the murder of Republican lawmakers, I don't know what Republicans can win in the state of Virginia. And of course, this one is the big one in the three-way race in the New York City mayoral election. Zoran Mamdani, the Islamist, with a 91.5% chance, according to Polymarket, of winning that race. Why am I focusing on the betting markets this morning? Well, over the past few elections, they have been decent indicators of actually who will end up winning. Now, betting markets, as opposed to polls give you a snapshot, sometimes accurately, sometimes very much not accurate, of what the electorate is feeling at a given moment. Betting markets try to look for inefficiencies, and there's a lot more money at play here, so there's a lot more incentive to be right for those putting big money on elections. Well, this is a weird timeline. President Trump came out yesterday and basically endorsed mayoral candidate for New York City, former governor of the state of New York, Andrew Cuomo. He said in a post on Truth Social, quote, "Whether you personally like Andrew Cuomo or not, you really have no choice. You must vote for him and hope he does a fantastic job." Again, I say this again, the guy who killed grandma in the nursing home, he would be actually mercy for the citizens of New York City. So the citizens of New York City, people like this, who have already voted for Zoran Mamdani, the Islamist. Here's a woman on the street interview that went down over the weekend.
I voted for Mamdani.
Okay, can you tell us why?
I'm just looking for someone new and not part of the established Democratic Party who also hasn't been accused of sexual assault.
I spoke to the other side a little bit, and they're concerned about like the government-run grocery stores and the free buses. What's your response to that?
I think government in the U.S. is great in the sense that there's always balance, right? Like no one person is making all the decisions, and so I think there'll be balance within.
He describes himself as a Democrat socialist. Like, do you feel like socialism would work in New York City?
No, not necessarily. Yeah.
Okay, then. That woman in a woman on street interview just saying, American government is balanced and that's why it's so good. And I think that Zoran would be really good. And I like government-run grocery stores. Hey, do you think socialism would be good in the United States? No, I don't think so. I mean, what do you do with that? What do you do with that? That's a people that are way too far gone. Well, I shared a few polls yesterday about the state of the country, the state of play as it pertains to President Trump's approval rating, other issues. President Trump reacting to some of those polls in a post on Truth Social yesterday. Quote, "So many fake polls are being shown by the radical left media, all slanted heavily towards Democrats and far left wingers. In the fair polls and even the reasonable polls, I have the best numbers I have ever had, and why shouldn't I?" On the issue of the government shutdown, apparently I misread President Trump's post the other day because he came right back out in full-throated favor of nuking the filibuster. Quote, terminate the filibuster, not just for the shutdown, but for everything else. We will get all of our common sense policies approved, voter ID anyone, and make America great again. Remember, the Democrats will do it immediately as soon as they get the chance. He's absolutely right in that last part there. The only qualms I have about nuking the filibuster is that I'm not even sure if the Republicans can actually pass some sort of legislation or various pieces of legislation that all of us would actually want. That's how bad the Republican Party is in Washington, D.C., even without the filibuster. I'm not sure if they're capable of implementing an agenda. Here's House Speaker Mike Johnson on this issue.
So I talked to the president multiple times over the weekend, I mentioned, and of course the filibuster came up. This is a Senate matter. It has nothing to do with the House. Everybody wants to know what my opinion is. I mean, my opinion is irrelevant. I understand desperate times call for desperate measures. I also understand that traditionally we've seen that as an important safeguard. I mean, I obviously shared my thoughts with the president on that. As much as I have wanted to blow up the filibuster sometime as a House member when we were not getting what we wanted done in our agenda, I hear my Senate Republican colleagues, some of the most conservative people in Congress, who say it's an important safeguard. It prevents us. It holds us back from the Democrats' worst impulses. What would the Democrats do if they had no filibuster impediment, no speed bump at all?
Well, pretty much everything that they've done with the filibuster in place, Mike Johnson. Speaking of those Democrats, they've moved on from funding trans surgeries, funding healthcare for illegal aliens. They've moved on from, well, we've got to extend the Affordable Care Act subsidies. Here is Hakeem Jeffries saying the government needs to be reopened because Jeffrey Epstein.
Well, the Trump administration and Mike Johnson are running a pedophile protection program. That's what they've been doing. And that's the reason why they refuse to swear in Representative-elect Adelita Grijalva. For weeks now. She was elected in late September decisively. And Representative-elect Adelita Grijalva still hasn't been sworn in.
So there is Hakeem Jeffries accusing in the most, salient example of projection, accusing the Trump administration and Mike Johnson of running a pedophile protection program. Music to the ears, I'm sure, of every sufferer of Trump derangement syndrome. A big topic of conversation, of course, this week. Welfare benefits like SNAP and other food welfare ending over the weekend. So what does that actually look like? What is the average person? I'm not necessarily saying this is the average person, but what is a person who uses these SNAP welfare benefits for food sound like? Well, listen to this New Mexico woman.
The first thing I did was grab my phone and call, and when I heard $0, my chest went into my throat.
Maggie Aragon has been a SNAP recipient for more than 3 decades. Even with these benefits, she says she also relies on food banks to get enough food.
I have depended on those benefits since the 1990s, and it's detrimental to my life if I don't get them.
That is not exactly ideal. I don't think that's ideal. Just discussing being on government welfare for 30 years as if it is just, everybody's on welfare. Everybody has to do this. There are legitimate cases where I think it's justified for them to help people buy food. That is not one of them. That's not one of those cases whatsoever. That woman, 30 years on government welfare to buy her food. I don't know how old she is. That was an interview with KOAT TV in New Mexico. And I just, again, that is welfare. When we've got 40 million, I think I saw the number, 40 million people just relying on the government dole. That's just not sustainable, and it never was. And especially in recent years when you've got so many illegals likely on government welfare as well. Well, back to Michigan we go. 2 men are facing federal charges for allegedly plotting an ISIS-inspired Halloween attack in the U.S., possibly on the scale of the 2015 terror attacks in Paris that killed 130 people. An FBI raid on Halloween morning stunned neighbors in Dearborn. Of course, in Michigan, that is the home to the highest concentration of Muslims in the country. Mohamed Ali and Majid Mahmoud face charges of, quote, receiving and transferring and attempting to conspire to transfer firearms and ammunition, knowing and having reasonable cause to believe that the firearms and ammunition would be used to commit a federal crime of terrorism. Attorney General Pam Bondi wrote in a post on X, quote, "Our newly unsealed complaint reveals a major ISIS-linked terror plot. According to the complaint, subjects had multiple AR-15 rifles, tactical gear, and a detailed plan to carry out an attack on American soil." She said, thanking officials for averting the attack before innocent lives were lost. If convicted, Ali and Mahmoud could face up to 15 years in federal prison and a $250,000 fine. So, again, usually these are stories, unfortunately, that we talk about the FBI ignoring known wolves. This time, they got it before those wolves could do anything. When we come back, new numbers regarding deportations are out. I present to you the dumbest person in the world, and Nancy Pelosi turns down the temperature. That's coming up next. I present to you the dumbest person in the world. Here's actor George Clooney.
I wanted there to be, as I wrote in the op-ed, a primary. Let's battle test this quickly and get it up and going. I think the mistake with it being Kamala is that she had to run against her own record, and it's very hard to do if the point of running is to say I'm not that person. You know, it's hard to do, and so she was given a very tough task. I think it was a mistake, quite honestly, but we are where we are. We were going to lose more House seats.
George Clooney, actor, and basically a good little foot soldier of left-wing America, the Barack Obama wing of the Democrat Party. He is the one who held that fundraiser for Joe Biden in Los Angeles last year. He wrote on multiple occasions how confident he was in Joe Biden's acumen. And then he wrote in that famous op-ed, "Oh, we gotta dump Joe Biden." And now he's saying, we should have had a primary. And yeah, he was saying that last year to some degree. Hindsight is 20/20. And it turns out, Kamala Harris, not all she was cracked up to be. I still maintain, I believe that it was always part of the plan when they dumped Joe Biden. And whether or not he was aware that he was being dumped, whether or not it was actually him or his chief of staff or whomever who sent that letter out to the world on that Sunday afternoon last summer, I still maintain that it was actually Joe Biden's revenge to preemptively select Kamala Harris, because he put the Democrat Party in basically a no-win scenario. Kamala Harris or dumping Kamala Harris and basically crapping all over the sitting president. So there's that. Well, it's been about 270 days into the Trump administration, and we're starting to see, we think, some results when it comes to Trump's deportation program. Here is Department of Homeland Security Assistant Public Affairs Secretary Tricia McLaughlin yesterday.
Well, the president is all about results, as is Secretary Noem. And really, what President Trump, Secretary Noem, and our law enforcement have been able to do in the past 270 days, despite the injunctions, despite the obstruction from sanctuary city politicians and these activist judges, is really nothing short of extraordinary. 2 million illegal aliens exiting the country. That includes 1.6 million deportations and over 500,000 deportations from our ICE and CBP officers. But we're going to be really surging resources. We have 10,000 new ICE enforcement officers that are going to be hired in the coming days. So we know that we're going to continue to arrest the worst of the worst off of the streets of America's sanctuary cities and across the nation.
That is Tricia McLaughlin from the Department of Homeland Security discussing the deportation numbers. Of course, the big one there is 1.6 million self-deportations. That is a major deal. I want to discuss that more in Air Analysis coming up a little bit later. Here's Nancy Pelosi on CNN yesterday talking about and actually doing a good job at turning down the temperature when it comes to rhetoric in politics.
He's just a vile creature, the worst thing on the face of the earth. But anyway.
You think he's the worst thing on the face of the earth?
I do, yeah, I do.
Why is that?
Because he's the president of the United States and he does not honor the Constitution of the United States.
So there is Nancy Pelosi. Hats off to her, bringing down the temperature, dialing back the rhetoric. Now Trump has been demoted to, quote, the worst thing on the face of the earth, according to Nancy Pelosi. So, got to give the old hag her flowers there, actually practicing what she preaches and bringing down the temperature in the room. I do appreciate that. I think a lot fewer crazies on either side of the political divide. I think a lot fewer crazies are going to be as willing to inflict violence upon Trump or his supporters now that he's been demoted to, quote, the worst thing on the face of the earth. So appreciate former Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi there. Well, Larry Alex Taunton is an independent journalist. He used to be a correspondent for Fox News. He has the show that is on YouTube, on podcast, Ideas Have Consequences. A very, very smart man. A great follow on social media, especially on X. I recall earlier this year, he described his trip to Cairo, Egypt. He had a dust-up with USAID over in Cairo. Not exactly sure what went on there, but that's all that I remembered of him talking about his trip to Cairo, Egypt. He went to Cairo right after his annual trip to the World Economic Forum's annual confab, I think in January or February. I didn't think about his trip to Cairo again until yesterday when I read this thread. This is a thread on X from Larry Alex Taunton, independent journalist and activist. I want to read this for you. This is a portrait of persecution in Nigeria. Larry writes, quote, when I was in Cairo earlier this year and all hell broke loose with Egyptian state security outside of USAID, here's the secret part I could say little about at that time. I wasn't in Egypt for USAID. I was there to meet with Nigerian Christians who have suffered at the hands of Boko Haram and the Fulani herdsman militia, both Islamic terrorist groups. You see, I was in Nigeria some years ago to report on the terror for Fox News. The plan was simple. I'd fly into Abuja without bodyguards. I have a philosophy about the ineffectiveness of bodyguards in these situations where I would be swiftly picked up, hidden in an automobile, and driven 6 hours to the north on roads where terror attacks are common. The idea, like visiting a cartel town or any other dangerous place, is to be in and out before the baddies know you're there. When I tried to return last year for the same reason, the Nigerian government effectively blocked my entry. The Christians with whom I was to meet did not have visas to enter the U.S. or Europe. No worries, I told them. I'll meet you in Cairo. I would fly there directly from Switzerland after my annual trip to the World Economic Forum. Their passports would be good enough to get them into that country. And I was already planning to meet with persecuted Christians there known as the Zabaleen, which translates literally the garbage people in Egyptian Arabic. Why the secrecy? Larry Alex Taunton writes, while Egypt isn't an Islamic state, it is nonetheless a Muslim majority, where Islam is the state religion, and they aren't too keen on Christians, especially African ones. Western Christians are generally regarded as milquetoast tourists and not a threat to the Egyptian Muslims. I had to write a letter of invitation and state the purpose of the meeting. Needless to say, I didn't reveal the real purpose because the Egyptian government would block their entry. Arabs treat black Africans, even Muslim ones, as inferiors, if not mine as well. All of this would still be kept hush-hush were it not for the fact that after USAID and that poop storm that followed, I cannot return to Egypt ever again, and Cairo, I had hoped, would become our place to meet. We have strived in our small way to assist and encourage these brave people who suffer in ways most Americans cannot conceive. What does this persecution look like? Larry Alex Taunton writes, it's planned well in advance, funded by Saudi Arabia and others, relies on a long-term strategy, is aided by the United Nations, and news of the horrific reality is hotly suppressed. The strategy, according to Islamic law, a man can have as many as 4 wives and innumerable concubines. An African Muslim male might have 50, 75, or even 100 children. It's common and encouraged. Islamic leaders show up at his door and tell him they will feed and educate his children, but they must be taken away. He agrees, and the children are driven off to a neighboring Christian village or country where they are dropped off. Truckloads of kids began showing up in Nigeria 2000 and then again in 2012. Nigerians will tell you they wondered what was going on. Frankly, this is not too dissimilar from the Biden-era program that imported illegal aliens and resettled them in red states. An imam will then give these children trinkets to sell, a minimum of food to encourage them to be resourceful thieves, and he will radicalize them. As time drew near for an attack, the children will be given weapons, usually machetes and AK-47s, and some training. Because the children will now know the city, town, or village to be attacked, the terrorists will simply ask them, "Where does the vicar live?" or this or that person to be murdered. This is the pattern repeated all over Western Africa. Initially, only northern Nigeria was affected, but the attacks have creeped southward over the past 2 decades. One Nigerian Christian told Larry Alex Taunton he was watching TV in his home when the first attack occurred. He heard gunfire bursts and then the windows of his house exploded. Africans who can afford it have walls with shards of glass embedded in the top surrounding their homes. He could see the Fulani climbing his walls. Quickly, he led his family out via an escape route he had long prepared. They lay in a cornfield and watched their home burn. Well off by Nigerian standards, he brought weapons and bought weapons and armed the people in his church. When the Fulani militants next attacked the Christians, now armed, bloodied them, inflicting massive casualties, the United Nations intervened, calling it a human rights violations, and disarmed Christians, knowing full well it made them more vulnerable to attacks. As for the Nigerian government, it's now controlled by Muslims. They look the other way, much like Sadiq Khan in London. When a white person is knifed, raped, beheaded, or otherwise attacked, this kind of thinking is alien to Western minds because Westerners are heirs of a Christian moral sensibility whether they know it or not. Thus, Westerners, Americans most of all, cannot conceive that the violence is neither incidental nor anomalous. Indeed, it's central to their strategy, be it in Nigeria, Sudan, Sadiq Khan's London, we hope not, Mamdani's New York City. The goal is to kill you or drive you out, conquest, and it's working. The exodus of Christians from northern and central Nigeria is repeating itself in London, New York City, Minneapolis, and the capitals of Europe. Surah 9:5 of the Quran says, "Kill the unbelievers wherever you find them and take them, detain them, and sit in wait for them." At every place. But if they repent and keep up the prayer, surely Allah is merciful. Larry Alex Taunton concludes it's not radical Muslims who believe and practice this. It's Orthodox Muslims, the one who take the Quran, Hadith, and the life of Muhammad seriously, as every Muslim is supposed to do. And Muhammad modeled violence. Let us pray for the persecuted, assist them, and resist evil. So that is an X-thread from Larry Alex Taunton I thought was excellent and painted a portrait of the stunning violence we're seeing in Nigeria against the Christian church. You should follow Larry on X, at Larry Taunton. At Larry Taunton. Taunton is spelled Taunton. Larry Taunton. An excellent thread from this independent journalist. When we come back, air analysis on why I think the self-deportation numbers are so crucially important to the Trump administration. That's coming up next. And finally, air analysis, slightly acidic, mostly necessary. I want to re-rack this clip from DHS Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs, Tricia McLaughlin.
Well, the president is all about results, as is Secretary Noem. And really, what President Trump, Secretary Noem, and our law enforcement have been able to do in the past 270 days, despite the injunctions, despite the obstruction from sanctuary city politicians and these activist judges, is really nothing short of extraordinary. 2 million illegal aliens exiting the country. That includes 1.6 million deportations and over 500,000 deportations from our ICE and CBP officers. But we're going to be really surging resources. We have 10,000 new ICE enforcement officers are going to be hired in the coming days. So we know that we're going to continue to arrest the worst of the worst off of the streets of America's sanctuary cities.
That is DHS, Department of Homeland Security, Assistant Public Affairs Secretary Tricia McLaughlin. 1.6 million self-deportations in less than a year on 500,000 manual deportations. from Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and more on the way as Immigration and Customs Enforcement continues to try to level up their staffing. So, obviously, any deportation is important. I do think that this number, 1.6 million, that is 3 times the number of manual deportations, 1.6 million self-deportations, I think it proves one thing. I think it proves that the Trump administration and the federal government doesn't actually have to get every single illegal alien themselves. They don't have to. I think what this number proves is that the mere threat of being deported, I think the mere threat is enough to drive out a lot of people who are here illegally. Those who are smart enough to understand, if I get deported, I can never come back. My chance is over, unless, of course, another Democrat is elected president, and then they'll probably open up the borders again. But by and large, my chance might be over forever of getting back into this country. So let's take our chances elsewhere in my country of origin and cut our losses and get out of here for now. 12 million, 10 million, 8 million, whatever the official number was of those who crossed over the southern border just under the Biden administration. We're not talking about the last 2 decades. That was going to take forever, especially at the current pace that the Trump administration was on. And I know they're not happy about that. That's why there's been some shakeups, allegedly, at Immigration and Customs Enforcement. They were not happy about the pace of deportations, but I do think the pace of self-deportations can prove that you don't have to, as the federal government, get every last one of them. I hope they do. I hope that's their goal. I hope they proceed with that in mind. But I think the mere threat, and I think that's maybe why you see a lot of these sizzle reels and a lot of these very public deportation raids from Immigration and Customs Enforcement. I think that's one of the reasons. They actually want this to get out into the ether. They want all of these raids, all of these deportations to get out there and reach the populace, to warn other illegal aliens, hey, you are not safe here. You better go back. You better go back. That is going to do it for a Tuesday. You have a good day. Back at it again tomorrow. I'm Aaron McIntyre, and this is the AM Update.